My guest expert this week is my good friend Austin Napierski. How are you, Austin?
I'm good, man. Yourself? How you been?
Not too bad, not too bad. What have you been up to lately?
Just hanging out, just going to school, working,
Yeah.
living the college life as one does at BYU, right?
Yeah. So what do you study at BYU?
I'm a neuroscience major right now, and minoring. I'm kind of heading in a pre-law direction, but we're still trying to figure out exactly what we're gonna do with that.
Yeah. I almost did that for a little while too. Not the neuroscience, but the law. So
Gotcha.
So what have you been doing for work lately in terms of your church?
In terms of my church, I got back from what we call a mission a year ago. It was like a year ago, 2 weeks ago, I think. And since then, I've mostly been just doing things to kind of maintain kind of a little community. Me and some of my friends have been hosting a little something like a Bible study type thing every week, getting people together. We get like a decent crowd, like 70 or 80 people out every week, which is pretty cool. And it's also not that hard because there's a lot of members of the church or Mormons here in Provo. BYU is kind of the hub for people like me that have just got home from missions and come home, and it's kind of stereotypical that everyone looks for wives and stuff, but we're just kind of hanging out, just learning about Jesus, and that's kind of what we've been doing a lot since we've been home. I was released as like an official missionary of the church back in March, and since then I've just been kind of doing my own thing.
Okay, so for the people that don't understand what a mission is in the Mormon church, could you explain a little bit about what it is, why you do it, and what did you do for yours?
Yeah, so basically a mission is you're called somewhere, and both men and women, once you hit the ages like 18, 19, you're allowed to go. You just have to go through do some medical checkups. They go through what they call like a worthiness interview to make sure that you're adequate to, because we consider it a sacred responsibility to represent Jesus. And so they make sure you're worthy and you've been behaving yourself, so you don't just go out and kind of trash on everything, right? So you kind of get in that situation and you go out and just for 2 years or 18 months or however long you need to. I was out for 19 months, and you just go out and you teach people about Jesus if they want to learn. You help serve them if they need it, and you just get assigned to somewhere. So I went to a place called Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. If you know where El Paso is, it's right on the other side of the border. If you played the Borderlands video game, you should know it all right. And so I spent 19 months there. I did a lot of the teaching about Jesus. We had to be a little bit cautious with some of the service stuff that we did, just because there was a lot of drug influence there, and so we tried not to get too entangled in certain circles. But yeah, that's basically what I did.
What was like a typical day there in Mexico for you when you were doing your missionary work?
I'd get up at 6:30. I'd work out for 30 minutes, get ready for the day. I'd do we'd call it personal study and companionship study, because we live with a person, like another missionary, always. We always have to be, we go 2 and 2 everywhere. And so we'd have a personal study, we'd have a companionship study, which we'd study the lessons we'd be teaching, or we'd be thinking about the people that we've been talking to recently, and how we can help them, what's best going to help them achieve their goals that they're trying to do with relation to Christ or anything like that, or what service projects we have planned for the day. We'd plan all that out. We do a language study, because probably about half of the people where I was serving, they were Americans, and so didn't know any Spanish, so we had to grind in an hour of Spanish every day, hour of the companionship study and an hour of personal study. Then at 11 o'clock we'd be out. Some places for their missions they'd have cars and stuff, but we didn't even have bikes. We were all walking everywhere. So you'd get dirty shoes and sweaty shirts and dusty everything, but it was fun. You just talk to people on the street. We weren't personally allowed to knock doors, again, because it's not the safest spot, but missionaries are pretty typically known around the world for door knocking and being those like hand in hand with salespeople. So um, I spent a lot of time just talking to people. We talk to them, schedule appointments with them, teach them, serve, and we'd get back to the house at 9. We'd go to one of the members of the church over there. We'd go to their house for a lunch, and then we'd be off again until 9 p.m. We'd be back in the house. We'd like go home, reflect on the day a little bit, and zoink because we were tired. We'd be out.
So what was like the typical response from locals there that like either had never seen a couple of handsomely dressed Mormons walking down the street, or are like very Catholic, or like what was the average
Yeah.
response?
So where we were was a very heavily Catholic area. But they were kind of a Catholic belief that they're just Catholic just because their family has been for centuries, right? Or I guess centuries, honestly. And so they just were kind of Catholic by blood. And so they knew who the Mormons were, depending on how kind of ghetto the neighborhoods were where you are. If you were kind of in like middle to low class neighborhoods, because there weren't that many like really high class or anything like that. I mean, just considering where we were. But if you were kind of in the middle to low class neighborhoods, people would know who you were, and they'd just call you the Mormons. They'd be like, "Oh, it's the Mormons." Or if you'd like talk to them, they'd just be like, "No, I'm not interested. Like, I have my church, I have my religion. Like, we're good." But then in like really ghetto places, they'd just either be like drunk and coming up to you and like trying to like hug you and stuff, or they'd just be yelling American. You get like cursed out every once in a while just because some people are angry for no reason. But I mean, it happens. Happens to the best of us. So
Yeah, there's always going to be those kinds of people with that attitude, no matter who you are or what you're there for, right?
100%.
So I feel like with most families, when you're a kid, at least with most devout families that I've known, like growing up, you have this feeling like, oh, how come Jimmy's family doesn't do the same thing? Why don't they do this or this or this? Do you understand what I mean? Kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
so. I want to ask you, when did you know that this was something that you really was really important to you, and something that you loved and wanted to be a part of?
Honestly, it didn't happen till like right towards the end of my senior year. Like in high school, like people knew me as like the Mormon, right? It was like me and like I mean, because there weren't many people and we were like from Utah, and like if you're from Utah, you're automatically the Mormon there, right? But like it wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to incorporate into my life really far extending into the future. Like it was just kind of I was living at home, kind of felt the obligation to like go home and like do that stuff because I was living with my parents, they were helping me out. Kind of a rule in our family, right? My parents never were really pressury about like, okay, you have to go on a mission or you have to get married by the time you're 18 or like any of that stuff, kind of the stereotypical stuff that you hear. But they were like, okay, yeah, you should go to church, right? And it's kind of if you're living under our house, you're going to church type of thing, which is great. Like I'm grateful for that. But it came to me when I had my entire life like planned out, and none of my plans went the way that I thought they were, and I didn't get into any of the schools that I thought I was going to get into. I was just pissed. I mean, I had worked pretty hard in high school, and so when I didn't get into anywhere that I wanted to, I was like, what? I have to go to like some place in Utah, because those were the only 3 schools I got accepted to, were the 3 in Utah, and I applied to like 12. And so I just was stuck with that decision. And so I was like studying for a test one day, and I just started thinking about stuff, and I like remembered a talk, like a little like talk that I'd heard a while back, like at church one time. And I was just like, I don't know why I'm thinking about this right now, but I'm gonna listen to it. Like, why not? And then when I finished that talk, it's almost like this is how I've described it to people before. It felt like my whole life I was like putting together a puzzle upside down. And then all of a sudden I put in the last piece and I flipped it over. Like that moment was like, it was big old switch. Like I didn't even know what I was kind of aiming towards. And then when I listened to that, for some reason, something in my mind clicked. And I'm a pretty logical person. And so something logical in my mind clicked for me. And I like flipped that puzzle over, and it's just like I saw that everything that I had planned was like, I mean, obviously I'm a spiritual guy. So in like my inner spirit, I felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. And then there's kind of that switch. And then I went, I haven't really looked back since. So I feel like I'm kind of like winging life ever since that moment, just because nothing was going as planned. But that's when I really felt that like that was when I was needing to go. And that's when I started deciding, okay, you know what, maybe a mission's the right thing for me. And maybe actually caring about like Jesus and church and stuff like that's what's meant for me.
Yeah, it's like that saying, you make plans and God laughs, right?
Yeah. Life changes.
You
Thomas
say
Rhett,
that
right?
you're winging life now, but I feel like that's part of living. Every day is kind of, you just take that day. Yeah, yeah, take that day as it is, whatever it may be. So I'm a little bit curious. Are there any maybe traditional or modern Mormon beliefs that you either think that stick out to you as interesting, or maybe you want to distance yourself from?
Yeah. So I mean, some of the stuff in the history of any church really can get messy. There's things, and I know in any church you'll find those types of things. Like there have been incidences. I'm pretty sure it's a common knowledge that in the past they didn't give African American men the priesthood. I know that's something that a lot of people ask me about while I was on my mission. They're like, "What's up with that? Why would that happen?" And the answer is, I don't know honestly. But for me, I believe in a living church, and I believe that God changes, and people are imperfect, and so there may have been mistakes made. But the important thing is the now. Another thing I think, honestly, like doctrine wise, for me, it kind of clicks and it makes sense. But I think a lot of people misinterpret what Jesus is supposed to be. And they put him or peg him as this hater of sinners and hater of people who don't believe in him. But one thing that I've just noticed is I've decided to actually make this something that, instead of just believing what the church believes, just believing what I believe and finding what aligns with that. I find that I just believe that God loves people. It doesn't matter if you're black or white or gay or straight or whatever, guy or girl, like he doesn't care. He's not he doesn't care about that stuff. And I think if everybody who, I'm not saying my views are the perfect views, right? But I think if everybody understood, no matter what religion or lack of religion you are, if you just taught love, the world would be a better place. And so that's what I believe. So I have a hard time sometimes with people within the church or within any church that start hating. Like that was one of the hardest things when I was on my mission. People would just tell me that I'm wasting my time for coming out and serving people. And there'd be times I'd get angry inside and I'd be like, you know what? I'd want to tell them like, go to hell, but I'd never say that. But I really did want, like, I felt that. But it's like, that's not what Jesus is, in my opinion. And it's not what he should be, just because that's not nice,
Yeah. Yeah, if everyone just tried to be nice, then there'd be much less problems, right?
Definitely.
But so you mentioned there that you think a lot of people don't really understand what or who Jesus is, right? So in your mind, what is he? Is it just love, like you said, or what else?
I think he's love, and I think it's important to, people get lost in trying to, what skin color does he have, or where would he have lived, or like what did he mean when he said this, or why did this happen in the Old Testament, or why did a bunch of people die, and why is the world such a terrible place? And I think it's just, to the root of it is, it's love. And so, I mean, we can get caught up in those details, but sometimes I think those details are what take us away from what he actually is,
No. So I want to kind of segue off to some completely different topic.
Yeah.
I just found out recently a little bit more about the church's beliefs on extraterrestrials. I didn't really realize that there was a belief that there are other planets with other humans. I don't know if you know much about it, but could you tell me about that or no?
Yeah. Yeah, so honestly, when it comes when it comes to like the basic of the doctrine, that's not like the that's not like the most central of things. It's not something that's touched on. It's not like you'll go to the church and you'll hear us talking about extraterrestrials. But there have been church leaders in the past and that have mentioned things like that. Like they've mentioned that God is a God of more planets than just Earth, and they're not saying, oh, there's this many planets that have this many people with life in them, but it is a belief that there's other planets, and that as a universal God, and a God of the idea of infinity, who's to say that there's a cap on the number of humans and the number of worlds and the number of stars? So I think that of which it's been talked about, I guess I should say. Anything else would just be my own belief or my own interpretation. But yeah,
So
I'd say that
what's your own belief or interpretation? I'm curious.
I believe that there's far more, a lot more life out there than we'd actually expect. That's my personal belief, and it's just, for me, it's just because of the idea of infinity and an ever expanding universe and everything. It's just too big for there not to be.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to tell to somebody that either criticizes the Mormon lifestyle or is interested in it and intrigued by the idea of serving Christ and praying and for themselves and their community?
I just say, remember, love each other and find be open to other ideas, right? Whether that's coming or directed to a Mormon or to someone who's not Mormon. Be open to other ideas, because when we close ourselves off to other ideas, that's where the contention comes in. The times that when I was on the mission that I felt like I didn't want to help a person, it was because it started with contention and I was closed off to their ideas and they were closed off to mine. And so when we open up and we really listen, that's how we're going to find out what we truly believe. And that if we live off of based on what we believe, like we're going to be able to die one day, and whether there's life after death, according to one person or not, we'll be able to be in those last couple breaths and we'll be able to say, you know what, I lived according to what I believed, and that's what life's about, you know.
When you say
And
they, who do you mean they? Who came to your house?
so MOH sent a van. The people in the vans had like full, like they were covered in like plastic, and like had the face shield and the mask and like the gloves and everything. And then she's like, okay, I'm gonna check your bag now. And I was like, mistakes were made.